What are you eating instant noodles for? I'll make you some noodles. Lv Shu was unwilling. It was so cold and he had to go out to buy instant noodles. On New Year's Day, the only place to buy instant noodles was the 24-hour Zhang Donglai convenience store 2 blocks away. I'm not eating the noodles you cook, they're tasteless. Go get me some instant noodles. Lv Xiaoyu was not happy. I'm not going, Lv Shu said as he began to change his shoes. Then smash the little walnut on your neck for me to eat. Lv Xiaoyu's eyes were shining. Smash your sister. Stop thinking about it, will you? Lv Shu was not feeling well. The thing he wore around his neck was not a walnut, it just looked like one because of its patterns. It was a bit black and not perfectly round. This was something that was abandoned with him at the orphanage. It looked ordinary. Although Lv Shu often criticized the staff at the orphanage for being irresponsible, he had to admit that they were fairly decent, otherwise, he wouldn't still have this thing. This thing was useless to others, but to Lv Shu, it was a small memento. What if his parents wanted to find him through this? Wouldn't this be a proof? Although he didn't have much concept of the word parents, he had been living well all these years alone. When he was led by the director of the orphanage to a strange couple who wanted to adopt a child, he had a little expectation for the word parents. However, when they despised him for being weak and sickly, that little expectation also vanished. He didn't seem to need parents that much, Lv Shu would sometimes think, but when he really wanted to throw it away, he still felt a little reluctant. I've said it a million times, this thing definitely can't be eaten, Lv Shu said irritably. I dare to drink other people's herbal medicine, what's there to be afraid of eating this? Lv Xiaoyu retorted. Lv Shu was pissed, you're making a lot of sense. Lv Shu, you've changed. You weren't like this before. Lv Xiaoyu said calmly, last year, you helped me. Lv Shu's face darkened. Lv Xiaoyu, enough. I'm telling you, if you keep watching those soap operas, I'll smash the TV. Then you'll have to pay the landlord 800 yuan, Lv Xiaoyu analyzed calmly. I'm going, I'll buy you instant noodles. Lv Shu turned and left. Lv Shu, standing at the door, tightened his collar. The winter in Luocheng was indeed a bit cold. Suddenly, he felt a bit of moisture on his eyelids. He looked up and saw that it was snowing. The fine snow was like cotton, slowly falling from the sky to the ground, on the roofs, and on Lv Shu. Why was his relationship with Lv Xiaoyu so good? Lv Shu stood at the door, watching the white snowflakes falling from the sky, thinking. He wasn't quite sure, perhaps it was because when he was 14 years old and sick on New Year's Day at the orphanage, Lv Xiaoyu gave him a cup of hot water. When he was bullied by other children in the orphanage, Lv Xiaoyu always called for the director. Maybe it was because they were all alone and needed to stick together for warmth, or maybe it was because Lv Xiaoyu trusted him and depended on him without reason, which gave him a strange sense of responsibility. Who cares why? Lv Shu laughed. Since there were no parents or relatives in the world, what was wrong with having one more sister? Even if this sister was always causing trouble for him, the sky in winter darkened a bit earlier. As it was the third day of the new year, there were hardly any pedestrians on the street. Only some occasional trucks passed by. It was not easy for everyone to still be shipping goods during the new year. For some reason, Lv Shu suddenly remembered the acrobat who was taken away during the day. Was the performer the superhuman that everyone was speculating about online? Do the cultivators really exist? Why were all these things just fantasies in the past, but this year they seem to be about to enter people's lives? There was also a person who left a deep impression on Lv Shu today, the young man named Ji Wei whom he met after leaving the backstage. Lv Shu was lost in thought about the possible existence of a more brilliant world. Just then, the sound of the wind seemed to shatter in front of Lv Shu, and the snowflakes in the sky were especially dazzling under two large beams of light. The light came from behind him. When Lv Shu looked back, the glaring headlights made him a little dizzy, but even so, he could still recognize that it was a huge truck, roaring at him like a beast. The sharp sound of the brake pads rubbing against the tires, the sharp sound of the tires gripping the ground, all rang out together. But the beast was out of control. In just a blink of an eye, the air was almost distorted by the pressure, and Lv Shu was hit by the huge beast and thrown out in the dark night. His body flew out like a kite with a broken string, breaking through the snow curtain behind him. Lv Shu's world seemed to slow down. He didn't know why, but he suddenly remembered that someone had said that before a person dies, they will recall their life in an instant. Lv Shu closed his eyes, trying to seize the opportunity to see what his parents, who had sent him to the orphanage, looked like, but he saw nothing. Lv Shu felt his life was fading away, just as all good things in the world will eventually fade away. This time, the pendant on his chest suddenly turned into dust. No, it was just the hard shell that Lv Xiaoyu couldn't break with a hammer. It turned into powder, finally revealing something inside that he couldn't quite identify. It looked a bit like an almond, but also a bit like a star. The star merged into his body, drifting along with the river of blood, and finally settled in Lv Shu's palm. After it emitted a warm current, it completely disappeared from Lv Shu's perception. That warm current was like the northward current in the Pacific Ocean, flowing into Lv Shu's heart. Thump, 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 the strong heartbeat, and then a white flame began to burn in his heart again. Yes, the flame that had once been extinguished in his body but was now burning again. The joy of reunion after a long absence made Lv Shu feel more comfortable than ever before. This blazing flame should belong to him. It seemed that since the beginning of the world, this was an eternal truth. With a thud, Lv Shu fell to the ground and there was no more sound. The truck driver jumped out of the truck, looking hesitantly at Lv Shu lying on the ground. He regretted that if he hadn't been driving while tired, this wouldn't have happened. The driver slowly moved towards the young man on the ground. His truck was fully insured, and he could afford to pay millions, so he wouldn't just stand by and watch someone die. Suddenly, the young man moved a bit. The driver was surprised and walked over, but before he could get there, he saw Lv Shu slowly push himself up, his face covered in blood. "You're in big trouble."